I think the faster you get yourself to only thinking about innovation, only thinking about product, because that's what made you special in the first place. Now put all your time and effort into that and let all the other tasks that don't necessarily require you be done by people that you've trained to fill those positions. That's how you get volume of innovation. And we've done that in our business now, where we have a product development team where it used to just be me. But now it's a team who's always thinking about what are we going to be doing in 2025? They're working on that today.
All right, Steve, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here.
We're here in your studio.
That's right.
This is great in Las Vegas, where it's record-breaking temperatures right now. It's
only 115. You know, it is steamy out there.
It is a little steamy out there. I stood out there for like 10 seconds, started sweating a lot, but it's worth it. We're talking today about this concept called the moat, and we'll get into the specifics of the moat. But you are a really experienced seller. You've been around the space for a long, long time. And there's a lot of knowledge here. For context for people that are listening, Steve and I talked maybe, what was it, like 2 months ago?
I think it was sometime early May.
May? Yeah. About recording this episode. And we were just kind of talking about what we wanted to talk about. And we were just talking about e-commerce. And this concept of the moat ended up coming up in our conversation. And we were like, I think that's what we should talk about. Like this concept of creating something around a brand, of creating a defense around a brand that's so strong that you are irreplaceable in the marketplace. So that's a little sneak preview of what's to come. But before we get there, I think there's a lot of value in pulling out your story, because that's where this concept of the moat originates from, is from who you are as a person and your involvement with e-commerce. So I think we start with who you are, and we'll get to the moat through a little bit of your story. So let's start there. How did you get into e-commerce? Where does that first origination come from?
I think it's an interesting story because, well, first off, you mentioned I've been in the industry for a long time. Right? On Amazon, you're talking about a long time. Like it's been since 2018. And 6 years is like a couple of decades. I feel like in this, it's such a dynamic marketplace. There's nothing like it anywhere else.
No.
So it has been a long time. I think the amount of knowledge that's been built up from that. But I'm one of those unique stories where I didn't start with my own brand, number one. Number two, I wasn't the one that started the store that got me into Amazon in the first place.
Wow.
My wife started the Amazon store for her mom's company that got me interested in Amazon in the first place. And I became an independent contractor for that company down the road to help out. So basically, the story goes is this. I'm in the Army at the time. We're stationed at Fort Carson in Colorado. And I'm in a very much they call it a green suitor position.
Okay.
So I'm wearing my green Army fatigues every single day, but I'm in a civilian organization, the Army Corps of Engineers. And I'm doing soil analysis and building demolition. It's very, very boring stuff. But it's an 8-hour workday. And for an Army person, 8 hours is like working 2 hours for somebody else, because you're used to the 15, 16-hour days of always being there. And so I'm doing the Army thing. My wife has this little e-commerce. She's on Equid, and she started this, helped her mom out with the Amazon store, and they're standing it up. And she's not the most technical person in the world.
Your mom or your wife?
My wife.
Okay.
Neither of them, really. Neither of them.
Okay.
But my wife in particular would be the first to tell you, she's got a marketing degree. The Amazon can be very technical when you're setting it up. And so she had dabbled with FBA a little bit, but when the sales went up, it wasn't like this association of I should be doing more of that, sending into FBA and then doing the advertising. So she was really just kind of operating in a more reactive state to what was happening as they were launching these products. I noticed her commissions were dropping. That's when I decided, let me just look under the hood and see what's going on. It's this is the family's income, and we want to have kids one day. So let's see what's going on. I'm on a fixed income from the military. So when I opened up the Amazon account, and I was experienced because I had sold on eBay when I was in college.
Okay.
And this was all the illegal stuff. So I'm selling New Era hats that are not New Era. The Jordans where the foot goes the wrong direction and all that. I was selling those in college.
But it had been since then Like until you've been.
It'd been a couple of years, but
Yeah.
it's just once you've seen one marketplace, you'd kind of seen them all because Amazon wasn't that sophisticated back in 2018.
Right.
And the first things I noticed on there was just pulling up the business reports and seeing, hey, your sales were a lot higher here when your commissions were higher. Let's get back to like, what were you doing here? And she's like, well, I don't really know. And we started digging into it. And it's like, okay, well, you had ads turned on and you had sent in a shipment of items to the Amazon warehouses. And that's where it started to click for me that, you know, there is money to be made for our family by just looking into the things that are not my wife's area of expertise.
Wow.
The logistics, the data, and understanding like what's actually happening. So I asked her, would you mind if I just took this over? Because I'm interested in this. I have the experience in doing eBay before.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to ask so nicely because she was like, take it. Like, I don't want it. Like, this is
said,
not
yes,
for me.
absolutely.
You know, it's all yours. You know, in that first month, I read 2 books about Amazon.
Wow.
And couldn't even tell you what books they were to this
You
day.
don't remember? You don't remember which
they're
books?
somewhere in my Kindle account, but from an old Amazon. I read those books. One was about how to get your item onto page 1. The Amazon A9 algorithm. And I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm digging this stuff in.
Back
Like,
in
it
the
makes
day,
a lot
yeah.
of sense to me. And the other one was just about like some version of like Amazon for Dummies type of a book. After reading those 2, I took what I learned in those books and applied it to the account, and sales immediately from 20,000 on average went to 40,000 the first month I was involved. That was only half the month because it starts April 15th, I think, of 2018. We went to 40,000, and then it was 60,000, it was 70,000, culminating in about $150,000 in sales about 12 months later, where we'd sold $1 million. And I remember I told the owners of the company, this can be $1 million account. And they laughed at me.
Really?
And they said, hey, it's Amazon.
They said, like, no way.
We like the cash flow from it. It's great. Just keep it going. Like, it's fantastic. But I could see the vision already from the customer feedback. And I was already, even though I wasn't a part of the company, I'm just hawking the stuff on Amazon. I was obsessed with the customer and the experience. And I looked at every review and I was reading it and understanding, like, they can't find this anywhere else. Like, this could be huge if people just come start looking for this stuff on the Amazon platform. And that's what got me into it in the first place.
Wow. You're still in the Army at this point in time?
Still in the Army.
Okay.
Still in the Army. The deal kept getting better because the deal from my wife, when it was small, they said, okay, we'll give you 10% of the revenue. This is extra revenue for us. The stuff's already sitting in a warehouse. So like, it doesn't matter to us. Let's just give you 10% of the revenue. So early months, she was making $2,000 a month, right? That 1 month that had gone up, she was making $4,000. And I'm thinking like, hey, it was awesome. This continues. Well, when I took over it, all of a sudden now, think about what our household income was. Because I'm making like 80, 90K as an engineer officer. And she was making a couple grand a month. All of a sudden now, this side hustle is we got checks for $15,000 for a month. And you're sitting behind a computer, you're not really doing that much. And it was like, this is like a bit of a cheat code, you know, to go along with this. But the important thing is that we weren't spending that money, we were saving that money because I was already thinking about, well, if I know how to do this right now, imagine how good I'm going to be at this 2 years from now. And if I have $100K to put into it, then this could actually become explosive for us. And
so reading between the lines there, it's not, so it's someone else's company, it's someone else's product that you're managing on Amazon. And you're even making that much already.
It got to the point, and this always happens for anyone who's selling someone else's stuff. The deal is good when the money is small. And then when you start making more than the owners of that business, like watch out because the renegotiation is coming. It's just a matter of time. So they came back to me and they said, you know, 10% is an awful lot. Like we weren't, like the margins had increased at this point. They had not gone down. Like we don't even know if we're really making any money off of this, you know, like they're, and again, one of the owners of the company is my wife's mom, right? But it was the other ones who were just looking at this and saying like, they're making too much, like they're making more money than I'm making. And like, I own this company, that can't be right. They didn't realize the opportunity that Amazon was. So it kind of worked out well because the commissions kept getting cut and then it was based off of profit instead of being based off of revenue, which is fine because I'm all for like working out the bottom line. But I tell people this all the time. If you're going to work for someone else first, there is no perfect system for you to get paid. Because if you get paid based off of revenue, then they're thinking like all you want to do is sell stuff. You don't care what price you sell it for. You just want volume. So you're not aligned with them. They want to pay you off a profit. Well, if I'm the contractor or the employee, you control the accounting and you're paying me off a profit, then like I can't stop you from putting whatever you want on the books on that expense line that takes away from the actual profit. Like that's outside of my control.
Of course.
So there is no happy medium there if you're working for somebody else. Until it's your brand where you figure out the whole bottom line comes to me, you got to be flexible with it.
So you saw that it worked.
I saw that it worked.
You saw, I mean, you're learning all this for the first, I mean, this is such an interesting story because a lot of people tend to like hear about the entirety of the Amazon community and what comes with it, and then like decide to go in. But you're kind of, and maybe you're aware that Amazon was a marketplace. Obviously, you were involved with eBay, but you're coming in kind of just testing the waters out, being like, hey, okay, let's try a couple of these things. Read a couple books, but like you're in the mix of things, and you see that this works, and at the same time, things are starting to push you towards having to decide maybe to create your own thing.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that's what happened then.
Well, the story gets more interesting because I always desired to go out and start my own brand. But I was presented with an opportunity because there was this conflict that was there around the profitability and being paid off of that instead of revenue. And I wanted to start my own brand at the same time. Well, I also was looking at all this customer feedback and data coming in. They were saying, hey, you guys sell these hospitality boxes of shampoo, like the ones you get in your hotel room. I have a little Airbnb in my house. I need like 10. I don't need 1,000. And we sold it 1,000 at a time. It was whatever the case pack was to sell to the hotel. That's what we were going to sell to these Airbnb owners as well. And they had to buy a ton. Well, I thought, well, why don't we just take all of this stuff and repackage it so that we have like units of 15 so that anyone, whether it's an Airbnb, and Airbnb is not huge at this time, it's growing and people are doing it, but they also weren't required to have these items in Airbnbs. Right. So it wasn't a huge market and people weren't looking on Amazon to find them for the most part. The market was still very, very limited. So instead of starting my own brand, I came and brought the idea to the owners of this company and said, hey, like this would be huge. And I bet you we could throw a convenience tax on top of this because now we're making it in the package that they want. We can probably charge more for this and people will buy it more. The answer I got back was, we have the SKUs we want. We don't want any more. But if you would like to make these with our brands and we'll sell them to you and you can do it on your own, then by all means, we'll give you an exclusive contract and you can do that instead. But we also aren't down with you spending so much on ads anymore. We want you to cut that ad spend down. In fact, turn the ads off.
No.
So I'm in this scenario where the main squeeze is telling me we don't want to do the things that I know are going to make money, but they're also giving me this like exclusive wholesale approach on day one of saying, make whatever you want, use our manufacturers. We'll even give you net 90 payment terms. So you don't have to pay for this stuff until after you. They were trying to offload what they saw as a problem off of it because they were not looking into the accounting to see how much money they were actually making and that it was a cash flow game, not so much a profitability game. Right. Very different types of businesses. So long story short, I took that opportunity and I'm out of the military at this point. I was working a sales job for about 6 months. In a couple of months, no more than 3 months of having the new store up and running, I was still managing the other store and helping them, but the ads weren't turned on. And I had my new store and I had these new kits that were perfect for vacation rentals. It was all the things they'd asked for in the reviews. We were probably doing $60,000 a month in the third month that we were in business because we brought exactly what they were looking for. Very limited on the ads. We're at like 5%, 7% ACOS. Like it's very, very low. And I'm realizing like I have like 50% margins on these. I jacked the price all the way up. So this is convenient. Like I'm solving a problem for you. So I'm going to charge you a lot more for it. And I quit my job July 4th of 2019.
Yes.
3 months into the journey. July 4th.
Oh, let's go.
It was July 3rd was my last day, but I call it my Independence Day.
Yeah, we'll call it July 4th.
I just celebrated 6 years of independence from the workforce. And I guess 248 years of independence for the country, which is also important too. But I didn't jump off a cliff when I quit that job. I already had a significant amount of sales coming through. Now, did I own the brands in my company at that point? No, I did not. In fact, I was coming up with new brands. I was going to start making new lines of this that I owned, and that was the plan. The story gets twisted a little bit if you go another couple years down the road. But at the time, that's when I quit my job and I was able to focus. There was no more distraction. I could focus just on Amazon. And I'm a student. Like, I'm very studious. So it's every day I'm in the forums. Every day I'm looking at the new stuff Amazon is putting out in the news and seeing how can we implement this? How can we do? But we're also seeing a huge shift in Airbnb where they now start to require people to have these items inside of it. Now, for anyone who's super savvy, they knew to go to a distributor to find this stuff for much cheaper. But most people that already had an Amazon Prime account were thinking like, oh, like I'll just go to Amazon, I'll go see if they have them on there. And we were the recipient of a huge boom that happened all the way up until COVID, which is where things got a little interesting for us. We thought this might be the end of the show, but every business owner thought that at the time. And I think by the time we got to COVID, we were already at about $120,000 a month. And we're still operating at 50% margins because the business is me.
Right.
And I had an accountant who was helping me who ended up becoming a business partner down the road.
Still very lean though. Just you two. At that
the two of us. That was it.
And you own the SKUs at this point in time?
We were still buying
operating?
the SKUs, and we had negotiated an exclusive 10-year contract from the company because we're still running all their stuff for them. And we wanted the security to know that like this wasn't going to go away because other deals had changed. So I said, I just want to have it in writing. And so we got that in writing. And that leads us up to 2020, big dip, and then Airbnb's just boomed out of that. Our sales skyrocketed up to 150,000, 180,000. This is like July of 2020 where COVID was still kind of a thing, but people chose Airbnbs over hotels. And as a recipient of being one of the only people at the time who had these offerings up there, they were coming to us to get it and they were paying sky high prices for it. Our profitability was through the roof. It was absolutely unbelievable.
Wow.
That gets us to 2021. In 2021, I caught wind that our supplier, again, the company I was working for, was going to sell. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is interesting because I don't own any of this just yet. So this is completely outside of my control. And I said, well, I got to sell first then. So 2021 was a great year for M&A in the Amazon space. The aggregators were out. They were looking to buy
That was a great
anything.
time. That was a great time.
You could have such a shitty business and they would be so interested in you.
Oh, Thrasio would be buying people up.
I had a conversation with Thrasio, talked to D1 brands. I mean, 12 different conversations with different aggregators, different private investors. Long story short, you take a story that getting out of the military, we probably have a net worth of 150 grand, some cash, it's in real estate. We started this business. And on the back end of that, in 2021, that aggregator talk culminated with us being under contract to sell this company that we didn't own the brands in, that we just had an exclusive supplier contract for. We were under contract for $6 million for that business. This is less than 2 years into, or right about 2 years from the start date of the company to being under contract to sell it for $6 million.
While not owning the brand, but while owning an exclusive contract.
Just an exclusive contract.
That is incredibly unique.
Yeah. And we kept hearing like, wait, so are they open to renegotiating this contract if we were to buy the company? And it's like, yes, they were. Like they were looking at it as like, hey, you're one of our largest customers now. Like this is growing so fast. We're making money off of you. You're still running the stuff for us too. And we didn't own it at that point. Now we started at that point to launch our own brand. So we had some private labels that were coming that were doing the same thing, but it'd be through all the same suppliers. It was just something that we wanted to have the trademark that we owned because we were already thinking like this can still go away. Well, long story short, I get cold feet on that $6 million deal because I think, well, shit, the work is already done. Like we've established, no one moved in this market until we did. We've established ourselves now. And now as this market continues to grow, and by the way, 35% of our customers that buy from us once come back to buy more. So if I can just acquire more customers and allow what we already have to continue to build, like this could be $10 million a year.
You're thinking of pausing to increase that exit number basically down the line.
Exactly.
That's the goal.
When we went under contract, we had done a total of maybe $2 million in sales at that point. The growth rate was just like 200% a year. I mean, it was phenomenal. And I'm thinking like, well, with this kind of growth rate, like, I mean, the 6 million could be 60. Like, why would we get off the boat right now? And so I got cold feet on that. It was a great deal with a good earn out. We pulled out of that. And I went to our supplier I told him, I just pulled out of my deal. I think you should pull out of yours too. I think we should merge these two businesses together because right now I'm getting valued at 4 to 6x my multiple.
Yep.
You guys are getting valued at 8x on your multiple. So let's take the profits of the brands that you own anyway and merge the two companies together, bring my profits underneath yours.
Nice.
And now we're playing an arbitrage game on the actual multiple.
That's good.
So it's not just what we do and the cash flow that comes from it, it's also the value of the company overall. And in April of 2022, we executed that merge. And so that is when we actually became the owners of all the brands that we had been selling. And the 3 brands that we planned on launching, we threw them off to the side. It's like, don't need those anymore.
So you put those on pause.
Put them on pause
This
completely.
takes all my attention right now.
Because now we own these 10 brands that we've been selling for them.
Yeah.
We have ownership. Now we have staying power. And now we know this can't just go to zero. It can't just go away because we're the ones who are calling the shots on what happens with this brand. And that's where everything changed for us to go from being super stringent on the margins and 50% margins to saying, all right, now it's time for us to build a team to do this and expand all this out because now we're building for the long haul. We're not just doing this for the cash grab that we think it is right now.
When did this happen? When was that moment where things kind of merged? And that's like phase 2, 3, maybe phase 3 of this story so far?
Yeah, I would say that was after the end of Q1 in 2022. We ceased to be separate companies. We all came together. And the only thing on my mind at that point was, how do I scale the hell out of this? Because now like my prices, just my cost of goods sold just got cut in half. So the margins are even better. And we now have this capability to go out and say, let's do more and more, let the market continue to grow, but let's build up a team because I'm doing 80 hours a week right now.
Yeah.
We don't need for me to be doing that because I'm really good at some of this stuff. I hate the other half of it. We were a team of 2. Today, we're a team of about 25 who are focused on that particular Amazon business. And I think that we're on track to do $50 million a year in 2030.
And so this kind of brings things into today, right? Like, would you say, is it fair to say that past that point, past where things cease to exist as their own separate entities, where you become, I don't know what the right word is, partners, I guess, maybe with this company, where you have ownership of the brands you're selling. That's probably a better way to put it. Does that lead into today? Is that where mostly
it leads into today? Because that company, we are still actively involved in that today. Okay. I am much less involved in it now than I was then. In fact, as big as it is now, and we'll do $12, $13 million this year, I spend about an hour a day on that particular business. And I think that there is an art to being able to remove yourself from the business that makes the business more valuable and more attractive to investors.
Definitely.
Which is the important piece of it. Because now I'm in M&A mode. I've been in M&A mode since I was under contract with Aterian, the public company that wanted to buy my first business, One Shop. So my thought process has now changed to think about multiples instead of thinking just about how do I increase my sales. I'm not thinking like, how do I pull another 100K out of this? I'm thinking about, how can I add tens of millions of dollars to this by getting more multiple arbitrage down the line? And when you shift your focus to that, instead of thinking about how you just organically grow the business, that's the game on top of the game. That the executives are playing in the Fortune 500 companies of multiple expansion instead of focusing just on, okay, how do I sell more today?
So this is an inflection point in the conversation. And this is what I hinted at in the beginning of the concept of what I think you coined when we talked way back when, of the moat, right? Making yourself irreplaceable. In your story, I see this theme of strategic moves being made, where you're making things happen at certain points in time to make sure that you're still involved, that however you were making money at the time, whether it was selling someone else's products or moving into a season of ownership of those products, you're making moves to really make yourself, you as Steve, and also your brand, irreplaceable. And those are two different conversations, but perhaps the moat concept is the connection point between you being irreplaceable as Steve and also the products that you're selling, the brand that you're creating. So I see this conversation now going into kind of this moat conversation. I want you to define it because I don't want to butcher it. Steve, how would you define, like, what is the moat exactly?
Okay, so what is a moat? I think it's really important to go through and get into the mindset. Warren Buffett's the one that made this really, really for businesses, thinking about the moat that protects that business. But if you go back to like the medieval times and the moat, I guess there's a castle inside the moat. So the moat implies that there's something worth protecting in the first place. So not everybody gets a moat until you have a significant amount of market share, or at least a big enough piece of the pie that someone would want to take it from you. Now, not all castles have moats, but the ones that do put them in for two reasons: either to deter armies that are walking by from attacking them in the first place, or for those that decided to attack them anyway, to protect them. And the moats serve those two purposes. So I was doing some research knowing that we're going to talk about moats, and I wanted to go back into medieval times.
Oh, this is great.
I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. I watch House of the Dragon, you know? So
of course.
I'm in that zone right now. And you think about this, these interesting stats. A castle that had a moat had a 30% less likelihood of being attacked in the first place.
Wow.
And if they were attacked, a 40% less likelihood of the castle actually falling to that enemy.
Compared to not having a moat at all. Yeah.
Not having a moat at all. Wow. And I think that it's getting in this mindset of thinking there's warring armies that are walking around every single day that are looking for places to plunder. Put it in the Amazon context for e-commerce. 2,000 people a day are making Amazon accounts per day. 2,000, 700 in the US alone.
Wow.
All of them are looking for a niche. I'm talking about, I got to find my niche. I want to find my niche. Well, the idea of the moat is that when you have that amount of volume of people who are looking for opportunities to come into the space, that we are deterring them first. So that they decide, I don't want to do it over here. And then if we can't deter them, if they try to attack, that we have the skills and the tool set to be able to repel that attack. In medieval times, people knew that if there was a castle that had a moat, it didn't mean it was impenetrable. It was just that you were going to sustain much heavier losses going after that castle than going after the one that didn't have the moat. You couldn't just put them under siege because they had access to the water already inside. The animals had access to water. The siege would take 10 times longer, and you would have way more casualties, especially for castles that had archers up on top. So if you put all of that in the context now of Amazon, with 2,000 people a day coming in, 700 in the US that want to weigh in, the moat is there to make sure that they can't get a foothold in our industry. And a lot of people think that they're getting onto Amazon, getting onto Shopify, and they think, okay, the moat is I'm going to have like the lowest prices that are out there, or I'm going to just advertise the hell out of it. And that's going to be the moat. It's going to be what protects me. Or I'm going to go trademark my brand, and it's going to give me a moat. And that's a piece
Which is
of
good.
it. It's good.
Yes,
you should
that's
trademark
great.
your
That's
brand.
great.
You should, but that cannot in and of itself be the moat. And I think there's a couple of elements that come to mind for me of great businesses and great e-commerce brands. They have great products, they have great marketing, and they have great protection. And it starts with having a product that people actually want, that they like. It cannot just be that you have a shitty product and all this great customer service, because the things that I think it's important to notate, if you're selling on Amazon, you don't have to have great customer service as a differentiator. That matters, but Amazon, for sold by FBA and fulfilled by Amazon, is doing the customer service on the behalf of like 85 or more % of sellers. People buy from Amazon because they know the customer service is good. They know the logistics is good. So that can't be a portion of what you say your moat is, that we have great customer service, unless you're selling fulfilled by merchant, FBM, and that can be a competitive advantage. But are you doing a better job than Amazon is doing with FBA? I'd venture to say no. So if those two things don't distinguish you, it starts with having great product. The product has to distinguish you somehow. It has to be a good product, ideally in a category that someone would buy it a second time in, so you can get that repeat purchase from them too. But the great marketing aspect of it, I say great marketing. What I mean by that is more so the trademarks and the branding that you have on there, the brand story, making it as compelling as you can for Amazon. Amazon is a bit of a different beast, because at the base level, it's a search engine. Is what it is. So if no one sees your product, no one can buy your product.
Right.
So one of the elements of having great marketing is your ability to win top of search. How well do you know Amazon's A9 algorithm? Well, today is a little bit easier to do that than it was back when I started in 2018, because people weren't reading the book I was reading. Well, there's software out there now that optimizes and uses AI to put all this together for you. So that can't be a differentiator, the A9 algorithm, understanding that, because everyone has access to that now.
It could be replicated to a degree across everyone,
it certainly
including
can.
you. Yes.
Yeah. But because people can't see your product unless you're in the top of the search, here's a couple of stats I remember from the book when I read it. This is going back to 2018, so let's just see if the stuff is still the A9 book.
Okay. Wow.
No, I'm sorry, it was the dummies book.
Oh,
it was the dummies book.
Okay.
87% on a mobile phone of the sales will go to the top 3 slots on a mobile phone that pop up on a keyword search.
I believe it.
The top one's going to be a sponsored ad, and the next 2 are going to be the organically ranked products for any keyword search you do. That's still the case today in terms of, I don't know if it's still 87% or not, but a huge lion's share of that volume is going to people who get themselves right there.
Yep.
Well, do you know how to do that? That's where your marketing comes to play. That's where your great product comes to play. And that's where understanding Amazon's system comes into play. If you're not in that section there, then as you scroll down the page, everyone else is fighting for 13%. Those are the scraps at the bottom of the table the dogs get. I don't want to be there. There's no moat there.
Yeah.
The moat's at the top, right? And I think that the interesting thing about that top of search is that it kind of bleeds into this idea that I have of an unspoken partnership that exists. I call it a coalition of competitors. A true moat means that at every price point, at every level, you have one or a variety of well-reviewed quality products that are sold for a good price based on the value that's there. So I'll use our niche as an example. We sell in the hospitality little soaps and shampoos for hotels and Airbnbs. We're the luxury version of that. And by the way, I like to be the luxury version everywhere that I sell.
Love that.
On Amazon.
Love that. Yeah.
Because I'd much rather be the guy who sells for $150 and sell 3 of those than someone who's selling for $15 and fighting for the scraps.
Versus
I
the
know
race
the
to the
difference
bottom.
of that. Be the luxury version if you can. Position yourself for that. But there are 2 other levels. There's that mid-tier version, and then there's the low-price version. Well, what gets interesting about this, when you think about top of search and those ones that pop up, someone is paying for that top spot. That's probably the luxury guy, because the organic rank is not going to be as high for the ones that are super high priced. So they're making enough money that they can afford to have that top spot. The next 2 is probably the mid-tier guy, and then what I would refer to very delicately as the bottom feeders, who are competing on price for the most part.
Is it still on page 1, you're saying? Like
still on page 1.
Okay. But the bottom feeders of page 1.
It's the bottom feeders of page 1, but they are a part of the moat.
Yes.
And that's what's special about this, is that collectively we formed this coalition where all of us have great reviews, ideally 1,000 or more. But at every price point, one of us is there, and we don't talk to each other. I don't know their names. Well, one of them is my manufacturer. He's the one who sells for low. So you have a lot of Chinese competitors who are down there betting on that low dollar. And a lot of people want that. And that's a great spot to be on Amazon. But the coalition basically acts where no one can come in and get a foothold. Because if you wanted to come into our industry, you wanted to sell hospitality shampoos, and please don't. But if you decide you wanted
Just
to.
in this example, though, yeah.
Please don't. The moat is actually the 3 of us combined. Because if there's only a top tier and a mid tier and there's no low tier, you could come in there and get a foothold. And what's to stop you from saying, you know what, there's probably more margin up on that high tier. Now that I'm here, I can work my way up. I don't want you to get a foothold in the first place. I want to stop you before you start. I want to deter you before you even decide I'm going to choose this niche to come into. So you have to decide, if you're one of these 700 people a day on Amazon coming in the US, or 2,000 around the world, and you want to come and compete with us, you have to decide, where do I want to make my entry point and fight the battle? As I look 360 around this castle, do I want to come in against the cheap sellers? Well, if you do that, we talk about sustaining great losses if you attack the moat. You got to beat them on price. Can you afford to sell for less than your Chinese competition, who's the one who's making it? I don't think so.
No.
So can you do it? Yes, if you're willing to lose millions of dollars by undercutting them for long enough that it puts them out of business, where you lost a ton of money in the process, and you can replace them as the low-priced offer in that. So can you beat them? Yes, but at great loss
Will
to
your
yourself.
army last
Can
long
you
enough to
withstand
withstand
that
losing
level
that
of
many?
siege? You know,
Yes.
we'll get a lot of Game of Thrones references. In here.
Absolutely.
Siege is a great word, by the way. You know,
Very relevant here.
but then in the mid tier, it's kind of the same thing. Where are you competing on price in the mid tier? It's kind of like a bit of the price to luxury ratio that you're competing on. Like, can you come in there? Well, now you're really kind of competing on like the reviews, I would say, in that mid tier,
Right.
because like how good is your product? Given a much better product. Well, I feel safer at the top in the luxury section because I know I have competitors who have great reviews with great products in that mid tier pricing. They're not luxury, but it's a nice product and it's very, very well reviewed. Yep. Thousands of reviews. At the top, are you going to come in and compete with my company in the luxury space in this market? You can do it. But again, we're competing on top of search.
Right.
So that means
that's a big moat.
It's a big moat because we're spending to be there.
Right.
Not only are we spending to be there, but we've been spending to be there for a very long time. So go back to the castle analogy. When the castle was first built, we've gone out and we've looted other places now. We've got a lot to hold on, and we can afford to pay to be there and even lose money to stay there.
Right.
So are you going to come in and compete against us on luxury? And that means you're outbidding us. You're going to lose millions of dollars in the process, putting us out of business. It's not impenetrable. You can do it, but at great cost to yourself.
Yes.
The combination of that coalition of sellers that is unspoken to me, that's your moat. Because it's the reviews, it's the great products across the board, and every price point is covered because now you can't come in and say, I'm going to enter anywhere. And in fact, we've seen this in practice because we've all been selling the top, mid, and lower.
Yep, you've been there.
In the same market now for 5 years. Other manufacturers, Chinese competitors, other brands that are well known to me here in the US have tried to launch and copy the exact same things that we're doing. They cannot find a foothold because they start at 0 reviews. And when you start at 0 reviews, you have to have a reason why someone buys you at 0 reviews. And normally that's because you're getting them on price or some type of value. Well, we have luxury covered, mid-tier is covered, and the low price is covered too. There's no way in unless you are dedicated to saying, I'm putting Steve out of business.
I'm going to lose money for X number of days.
You can do it. That's how you would win. That's how the moat gets built or it gets beat. And it's the same thing that happened in medieval times too, where someone said, I'm willing to lose half my soldiers
to take this guy is going down. I
don't care if it takes me 75% of my army. Like, we're getting this castle. That's like the Game of Thrones. And I think to me, that's what the moat is made up of. When we talk about great products, great marketing, great protection, your protection is that coalition of sellers. And the one piece we haven't talked about that bleeds into this is your trademark protection and or patent. Because if you can get a patent for a product, you should, and that will give you the utmost protection. But the next best thing is a brand registered trademark that allows you, especially if you have Project Zero, to go in and remove listings of people who are reselling or are counterfeiting your product. And that gives you an additional layer of protection. But to me, the patent and the trademark are not as important if you don't have that coalition of sellers, because there are other brands that have patents and trademarks too. It's controlling the category and those keywords that people are searching in. And if you can control those, you have staying power. And that makes the value of your business a lot more valuable across the board.
The patent and trademark are kind of like the tripwire that activates like the flaming axes that go down in your castle, right? It's like the passive thing that should be there no matter what, just in case an attack happens on your brand.
That's right.
There's an interesting aspect. There are a lot of different directions we can go in this conversation. Like, we could probably talk for 2 hours about this.
Yes.
Probably 3, honestly. There's one aspect that I think is really interesting that we could expand on, which is the aspect of building a brand identity to also create this almost impenetrable moat as well. And you touch on aspects of that, but I think that's an interesting one that people are very interested in, especially today, with the concept of building like a very recognizable brand.
To
compete with, like perhaps some way someone could compete with a moat is by having a recognizable brand. Like, oh, I recognize Crest, right? Or whatever it is. I recognize L'Oreal. And that being a potential like advantage that they have to penetrating in a castle, right? But there's also so that's one conversation. But there's something I want to stay with here that speaks to the people that are listening. And that's two trains of thought. Like I can see people that are listening being like, okay, this is great. What should I do with this information? Like how can I take this in the form of two trains of thought, entering into a new market.
Yeah.
And also what should I do to do this, to implement strategies to defend my castle?
Yeah.
So turning things around and approaching it from the flip side here is like, okay, what do I do if I actually want to go into a new market?
Yeah.
And what advice do you have for people that want to defend? What do you think?
Let's tackle going into a new market first, because we talk about this in the context of e-commerce and on Amazon, but we start to delve into where this is really not that much different from starting a pest control company in an established market. And how is it that you win in that? Well, there's still opportunities if you start a pest control company here in Las Vegas where you can have better customer service and you can have better lead times and be the one that answers the phone on the weekends when everyone else is not there, and you can build and start that way to get your foot into that market. Amazon's a little bit tougher than that because I think Amazon and its ecosystem with the fast shipping and the logistics and the customer service and the Amazon guarantee that if you don't love it, you can return it basically whenever you want at the seller's expense. They really limit once the moat is there, it is much, much harder for you to get in. And so here's what I would say. What are your goals? Because if your goal is to build a brand that's going to have an 8-figure exit one day, the path of least resistance is for you to position somewhere where the competition has not completed building the moat. Ideally, getting in early enough in an avenue, just like anywhere else in business, where before the established players are there, you get yourself up and running. And now over time, over a long period of time, you build that brand and that recognizable brand, and you have a shot of being a part of that moat and actually having that protection that's there.
Yeah.
That's really the way you go about it, is by being early. Now, if your goal is not to build an 8-figure exit brand or beyond that, can you come into a market and find areas of opportunity where maybe the moat isn't as strong as the hospitality shampoo market? Yes, there are better opportunities out there for you to look at that maybe have 7 people in the moat instead of 3. There's 7 opportunities now for you to infiltrate that market and come in. Maybe it's not just competing on price, but you can get the better quality product and you have a little bit of a better price than the third person on that moat. You can find your way into that foothold and become a part of the mix. So that's definitely doable for you to do. But my advice to anyone would be to think for the long term and to position in a market where you're solving a problem, and do that in an area. And people always talk about, there's no more new niches in Amazon. You know, they're all taken up already. It's like bullshit. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's based on the consumer, right? Like things that people buy change over time. There are always new things that are coming out, or interests shift and change.
100%. And I talk to sellers all the time who are coming up with Shark Tank quality ideas for products. And I'm like, I never would have thought of that. Well, they're solving their own problems. And this is where the advice for the e-commerce business is kind of the same as advice for any business, which, hey, solve a problem first and then turn it into a company. Too often on Amazon, people come in, and Helium 10 and Jungle Scout have kind of ruined the whole thought of in Amazon as a business model for people, because they go for the low-hanging fruit. And, we're going to help you find these niche opportunities. Well, 10,000 people saw that niche opportunity. And so all you're really doing is capping your upside and saying, hey, are you going to get some sales? Probably so. And here's a manufacturer that everyone else is already using too. And they make it so simple for you. I have yet to meet someone who has started a brand post-COVID off of Jungle Scout or Helium 10
that has done
that method of using, opportunity here, Helium 10, Jungle Scout, thank you. And they're looking today at, I got a 8-figure brand here.
There was a shift, wasn't there?
You know, a big shift, because that's, I call it the Wild West days of Amazon. People don't want to admit this, but Amazon was pretty easy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it was. Oh my goodness.
You could go out to China, white label any product, make no changes to it, slap your name onto it, and all of a sudden, like, you were getting sales.
You go back to 2016.
Right? Oh, I wasn't even around in 2016.
The worst photos. It was based on just being available. Just being able to find the product on Amazon. Didn't care what it looked like.
Now that you bring that up, this is something that I always think about, because early in my Amazon tenure, when I was still working for the other company, we didn't have access to all the graphic designers that we have now. But the standard was so much lower on the platform. Every hero image and every image that we had in our Amazon listings, I read that book. I did what the book said. I made some lifestyle photos. I made them all in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like PowerPoint downloaded in high format. I made them in PowerPoint. I took screenshots of them.
Okay.
And that's what got put on. That's where my first $60K a month of sales came from, was from screenshots off of PowerPoint that I made. I put a little sticker on there. I probably shouldn't have done it, but I put the Amazon logo on there. This is a 60 pack. This is a 25 pack, you know? And I did all of that, and you could get away with that stuff back then. But in this day and age, you can't just do white label. You can't just go get it and slap. I talk about Himalayan lamps a lot, because there's 10,000 brands of the same Himalayan lamp on Amazon, and nobody makes any money doing that.
Right.
It's white label was a tactic for the early adopters. Well, we've gone beyond that now. And so you have to be a bit more of a strategic operator if you're going to survive at getting your brand up off the ground. So it's just about what your goal is. Do you want to make a big one, or do you want to just, you know, eke out 100K a year and quit your job? If that's the case, all power to you, you know?
It's a really good point to think about, because maybe some people do want to make, you know, maybe some people aren't going for an 8-figure exit.
Yeah.
There's still opportunity out there for everyone, depending on what your goal is. Perhaps the moats are just larger, to use the moat example, in certain cases more than others. But your very specific example of what you did with the repackaging to suit the Airbnb, repackaging of the products to suit Airbnb customers, is a really good example of strategically thinking about, like, okay, where is there an opportunity here of recognizing where a lot of these sales are coming from, recognizing this kind of niche opportunity that came from something that you were already doing. That's a very good example that I think people who are listening or watching should take from this.
Well, I think customer obsession, I don't know if it can be taught, but if it can be taught, like, you should learn how to obsess about your customer, because to me, it was very natural of, I want to sell more, so I want to see every feedback that comes in. And there's a lot of feedback when you have 100 products. But I wanted to see all of them and understand, what do they like, what do they not like? And many times they'll tell you, and sometimes they'll even tell you how much they're willing to pay more if you would do this and solve the problem. That's what it was in my case, where I realized not one, but two, but like 3 people, which is for reviews, to tell you, I would pay this much more, and it wasn't exact numbers, but I would pay this much more if you would just give me what I need. I don't have storage in my Airbnb. I only have one closet to put everything in, and the toilet paper, and there's no room for the soaps. So it's solving that problem, but it's solving the problem and then capitalizing on the back end of, can I solve the problem? And if my solution to the problem is not patentable, and mine was not, then I have to move fast enough to capitalize, to get enough reviews on my product, so that when 35 other people copy exactly what I'm doing with the same format and a different brand, their reviews are so insignificant compared to mine that people don't even give them the time of day.
Yeah.
If you look at the breakdown of our category, you see big player, big player, big player, everybody else when it comes to the brands. And the reason that is because we moved very quickly. We found what worked. We solved the customer's problem, and then we protected it with our ad spend, protected it by having good quality product, long periods over time. You get to this point now, if someone wants to start off, like, how do you compete? Even in B2B, where it's less reviews, and B2B, how do you compete with 1,000 reviews? If it's D2C, 10,000 reviews, 20,000 reviews.
It's possible, but like going back to the moat example of like the percentages that you talked about, of being so less likely to even try and attack the castle, people aren't going to try. And if they do try, it's not very likely for them to succeed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a really good example.
Yeah.
So there's a whole second aspect here of, like, I think focusing on the upper end of this scale, right? On the upper end of making money, of scaling your business, your brand up to a really, really high level. What areas of this moat creation does this moat creation apply to all aspects of every business, no matter the size, or are there very specific aspects of this moat building that you think really apply to the upper echelon of, like, very successful brands?
It's a great question, because I think the most successful brands are the ones that have gotten themselves into a category where there's 1, 2, 3. Like, you know, it's like Airbnb, VRBO, and Booking.com.
Yeah.
Like, there's nobody else in the short-term rental space.
Yes.
You go to one of those 3 places to get it. It's Walmart and Target. You know, it's Amazon and Walmart and Target. Those three that are combined. When you get into that type of environment, it kind of becomes a monopoly of the three together. And that's where I think that now a rising tide lifts all of those boats together. But is it for just like the top tier? I think we recognize it as the top tier ones that have made it to such significant size. But that moat happened long before, when they were all much smaller.
Yes.
When there were other players who were there who didn't move as fast, or didn't have the same type of a game plan to maintain the advantage that they got. There's probably stories out there you can find of someone who solved a great problem and then didn't follow through with the infrastructure of not going out of stock on the problem that they'd solved. Especially in this day and age now, you can solve a problem and 50 other people see your success you have. You go out of stock for 3 months, you never get it back. You never get it back because most people don't have the strategy to understand how to get their first listing to 100 reviews. They solve this awesome problem, and someone like me comes in and looks at that, and I don't do this, by the way, but I could look at that and say, okay, like it's a great solution. You have 13 reviews on it. By the time you get back in stock, I can have a product launch that has 100 reviews on it, just because I know my way around Amazon better than you do. Therefore, you will never have a chance of selling this product ever again. And it's me and probably 3 other people that have the same resources, and you cannot do it.
You could have the best product that solves the worst problem for a customer, and not have any of these strategies implemented to protect yourself, and still, because you have the best product with the best solution, not make it. And I think a lot of people get tripped up there.
They do. And it brings up the idea of part of having the moat is having either the capital or the net payment terms that allow you to succeed. I'll say this, net payment terms are 10 times better than having capital coming into a business. Because if I can sell a product before I have to pay you for it, I have an infinite supply of capital now that I can use at my disposal. Whereas if I have capital coming in, that's helpful too, but it's limited. And so people who get access to net payment terms, which is an advantage that I had in the very beginning, where I didn't have to pay for anything until 30 days after I sold it. I mean, we were positive on every single sale that we had. That's a superpower. And you'll see people that get to the top of the moats are the ones who are able to either raise money or the ones who had access to great payment terms or some type of an arrangement, because you never have to worry about going out of stock when you're not worried about how you pay for. I hear from sellers all the time, but I need to buy a container. I don't have any money for it. You know, you're looking to make any investments right now. And I have to ask the question of, okay, number one, why are we here in the first place? Is it because you're pulling money out of the business that you don't have money for inventory because you're selling it for one price and you bought it for this? Or is your product not making any money? Like, all those are big problems, but it's also like, if your manufacturer felt like you were going to help their business, they would give you net payment terms so that you could grow and they could grow. Have you had that conversation with them? Before you come to someone like me to come and invest in your business, go talk to your manufacturer. They can be your bank. If they see the vision of you growing them, they can be your bank. And that adds to your moat when you have unlimited capital.
Going back to the concept of the chicken, it's really a chicken or egg question, I think, that can get stuck in people's minds around this concept. Which that's really good advice, by the way. The payment terms, the cash flow aspect of an Amazon business is something I think that people what's the right word? They don't consider it as much of a threat, I think, or they don't consider the possibility of it as much as it should be.
Because all the gurus tell them $10,000 you can build a $10 million brand.
Okay,
you know?
it's all cash
Where's
flow.
Kevin Dave when you need him?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. But it's perhaps it's the people that have at the top that you see with moats are there because they've implemented these strategies to build the moat from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's right.
Very early on.
And I don't know that all of them knew they were building a moat.
Maybe they didn't.
Right?
Maybe,
some people, because you're early and you can get lucky. And I always say, like, you don't know who gets lucky and who's good in this game.
Right.
Because until you see someone do it time and time again, they could have just gotten lucky. So be careful who you take advice from. Like, validate me before you take my advice.
Of course.
Because what if I just got lucky? And you're hearing how I did it, but there's many other ways to get it done.
So, okay, we talked about the aspect of flipping things around, what maybe to consider going into a place. Like, I want to go into a market. But let's talk again about, we're landing the plane of the conversation, going back to advice for people that are listening around building this moat. People that are listening, asking the question, okay, how can we understand what this concept is now. we flushed it out, but how can I do this for myself? What advice would you have for those people listening?
I think it comes back down to that great product, the great marketing, and then that great protection that's there. Again, the moat means you have something to protect. So if you're sitting at 10% market share of any market on Amazon today, that's a huge chunk of that market. But 3% is probably worth protecting as well. Not everyone's going to be in the same boat as me, where we got into a smaller niche and we own 40% of it, and we really want to protect that.
Right.
But how you protect it is, I think, number one, you definitely don't give up any ground. You stay in stock and you keep the quality of your product pristine, because the vultures are out there looking for you to go out of stock, as that to be a way for them to come into your market and take it away from you. But beyond that, I think getting yourself to a process where you are innovating as a brand, because without any innovation, if the knockoffs come, and the knockoffs will come, if you're not doing anything different or continuing to obsess about the customer as the customer changes over time, then that's an opening for someone to come in and say, hey, they served you well in the past, but now come buy it from me because we've made these changes to it. I have been surpassed by other brands in other businesses. And it sucks to be on the other end of it, where you didn't innovate. You just stuck with what you had and you said, I got a cash flowing business. I'll just let this one ride and I'll focus on the bigger opportunities. Well, when you decide to get serious about it again, you have an uphill battle just to get back the ground that you had before, because the market has changed. That customer obsession, again, you can't teach it, but never lose it once you get it. Like, never stop looking at the reviews. And it doesn't have to be you. And when I talk about innovation, I think it's important to note, you as the Amazon founder, you as the brand owner, you are responsible for that innovation. But if volume of innovation is going to help you stay ahead in much more competitive categories, then the faster you can get some of that off of your plate onto someone else who cares about the customer as much as you do and wants to innovate as much as you do, and that you're still involved in, but where you're adding to your team. And that's why I think it is important to look at, as you grow and scale your brand, you get beyond $15,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month in profit, looking at adding on third parties to help augment what you're doing as an owner, and look to hire both virtual assistants and employees into your business who can take over some of those aspects of the mundane things that everyone gets access to. Like, if you're a brand owner and you are the one doing shipments into Amazon and you're doing $50K a month in profit, I think you're insane. Like, why would you do that? Because that means you built something because you innovated, and now you're using your time to do something that literally anyone else could do for you. But you don't want to train that person, which limits how much time you have to innovate. I think the faster you get yourself to only thinking about innovation, only thinking about product, because that's what made you special in the first place. Now put all your time and effort into that, and let all the other tasks that don't necessarily require you be done by people that you've trained to fill those positions. That's how you get volume of innovation. And we've done that in our business now, where we have a product development team, where it used to just be me. But now it's a team who's always thinking about, what are we going to be doing in 2025? They're working on that today. 2025's products some of them are already in manufacturing today for 2025. And we're sitting here in July of 2024. If you don't have Q4 figured out for this year, like it ain't happening if you're doing something in Southeast Asia. So,
but that's a good challenge. The challenge of questioning your role and questioning what you should be doing versus what you're actively involved in. Should I be in the weeds every single day pressing those buttons? Should I bring someone else to do that? Like,
there is an element of staying in touch with your brand and with your product and with your market. I have found the best way for me to do that is through reporting. I still read a ton of the reviews that we have, but it's put into a report that I see every day that comes in, that someone else prepared for me. I want to know what our competitors are doing, but I'm not doing what I used to do on Sunday nights, which is I sit down at the computer for 3 hours and I go through my listings, who's advertising on it, what are they doing, anyone new pop up? Like, that's all being fed to me now. And so my daily morning routine includes a 15-minute report that's prepared daily, that has the company's financials, the brand's financials, what are click-through rates, conversion rates, how is our ROAS in the past week, how has that changed over time, what's happening with our ads. All of that I used to go searching for on my own. Now that's all being prepared by someone else. And I can very easily take a bite-sized chunk of what happened in our business yesterday and how healthy are we compared to what we were the day before. To me, that's very important. If now you can stay in touch by reading that report, now it's a question for you to decide, okay, what else can I get off of my plate and what should I get off of my plate? I dislike people very much. Very strong. I feel very strongly about this. Who refuse to hand off aspects of their business because, oh, it's too important. I can't give that to one of my employees. Like they wouldn't do as good of a job as me, and this is vital to the health of the business. Now, we talk about ads early, and I do think that owners should stay involved with the ads. It is the absolute lifeblood. But you'd be hard pressed to get me on any other topic involved in Amazon or in an e-commerce brand where like you can't train someone to do that task adequately and build in a check so that you know it's being done.
Yeah.
I think people think about training as in like, I give it to them and then it's theirs. I never hear about it again.
Yeah, you never.
Like training is a process, you know? And I know this from like taking our team from 2 to 25 on the Amazon side, where on day one, like, yeah, we trained them on specific tasks, but then when the task was officially handed off, it was a task with a check. So I know I can look at the check to see if the task was done right. And you can be strategic about how you build those in so that everything from logistics to your marketing to your advertising, you know it's still being done to your standard. But the vanity to think that someone can come into your business and that they wouldn't be able to spend 40 hours a week doing one task that you did for an hour a week or less than an hour a week, and that I got to keep this on my plate, on my shoulders. It's like, no, you don't know how to train people. And that can be learned, and you should start to do it, because what you're really doing is setting your company up to plateau based on the amount of time that you have available in your life. And I see this an awful lot. And it's not just with Amazon sellers, and it's not just with e-commerce sellers. This is in business in general. There is a ton of people who just deem that what they're doing is too important for anyone else. Like no one else can make these decisions that I'm making. And it's like, how do you think Coca-Cola does it? How does Facebook get by? Because is Zuck making every decision that's there?
Yeah, Zuck certainly is not making every choice.
Can you imagine if Jeff Bezos was like, I want to have like this like 2-day shipping everywhere and one day and then now 3-hour shipping with drones, but I want to make every decision myself.
Not possible.
Like, I mean, we should be learning from these titans of industry about what we can do.
Okay, there's a really interesting aspect here of advertising. You said you think advertising is, I don't know about but one core area that you think that you are still involved with. And maybe that other owners should be involved with too. Why is that?
I believe that because Amazon is so dynamic, and a majority of Amazon's revenue is driven from, or not a majority, but a large piece of it is driven from their ad revenue. They're always optimizing their ads. And it's gotten to a point where it is so confusing. Unless you come from that world to be the one keeping up with it, I think having a third party to help you out with the advertising is one of the smartest things you can do. It's the best thing I ever did back in 2019 when it got beyond, or 2018 when it got beyond what I was able to manage myself. But advertising is that one piece that I really think you never let go of until you're hiring people at the 6 figures and above. Because there's a level of care at 6 figures and above that I think you start handing off responsibilities of things that are vital. And with that great pay comes that great responsibility. But that's not something that's being given to someone who's making, $12 an hour. I think there's a level of importance that's there. So
that's good.
There's an element of it that I think the owner needs to stay involved, but it gets to a situation, to a point where you have to hand off all of it, and that's what you're hiring for that.
Advertising truly is one of those really specific areas in e-commerce and Amazon specifically that requires a certain level of effort, intentionality that goes beyond other areas.
Yeah.
And I think you touched on it perfectly. I think I'm landing the plane of the conversation here. I think analyzing everything that we talked about today, there was a lot between your story and the moats. A big theme that sticks out to me is honestly people.
Yeah.
And that involves the self. It involves creating a moat for yourself wherever you are. Maybe you're working for another company right now. You can apply a lot of these principles in creating a moat for yourself in your job, whether it's corporate, whatever it is. Like the stuff that you did for yourself before applies here just as well as it applies to building a brand and creating a moat for a brand. But the aspect of obsessing over the customer, of hiring the right people, of staying on top of things yourself. There's a lot here, I think, that involves the aspect of being human, of being a person. It involves other people. It involves the self. And I think that's a really good takeaway here, on top of all of the other very, very strategic aspects of building a moat as well. So, Steve, I want to thank you for being here.
It was a pleasure.
For this episode.
It was fun.
My last question, I lied actually. My last question is truly how people can follow you, get in touch with you, and learn from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Steve_Rolle anywhere you get your content. And we make it across 7 different platforms. So if you watch content on there, we're there. And very, very invested in growing in the Amazon space and continuing to build our own brands and also help others to do the same thing.
I love it. I'll put your information in the show notes and on the screen. For everyone watching, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that we have more conversations.
We should.
I think that we should
definitely talk about exits.
There was a whole other conversation
that. Yes.
that we had planned that we will have in the future. So, Steve, thank you again. Looking forward to more content in the future.
Fantastic. Awesome.